Go. Shabbat Shalom. Let's do this again. Shabbat Shalom. Boker Tov. Boker Tov means good morning. And Baruch Haba. Everyone say Baruch Haba. Baruch Haba means welcome. We welcome you. When we were singing a moment ago, we sing every Shabbat, Baruch Haba b'Shem Adonai. These are the words that Yeshua spoke to the Kohen Hagadol, to the high priest and to the priests there in the temple just before they crucified him. He said, "You will not see me again until you say what? Until you say Baruch Haba b'Shem Adonai. Blessed is he." In your Bibles it's translated, "Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord," which is a direct translation. But Baruch Haba is the Hebrew way, the Israeli way of saying welcome. So he said, "You will not see me again until you are willing to welcome me in the name of the Lord." Welcome to him who comes in the name of the Lord. Baruch Haba b'Shem Adonai. So we say Baruch Haba. Welcome. All right, if you would, Shemot, the book of Exodus, chapter 20, and we are studying the 10 words, is the way it is said in Hebrew, the 10 Commandments. So we've been studying on the first command, which is Anochi Adonai Elohecha, I am the Lord your God. And then he says, Lo yigel lecha Elohim acherim al panai, and you shall not have any other gods before me. Lo yigel lecha, lo, the negative, no or not. Lecha, yigel, to have, shall have, lecha, you, Elohim, other gods. Notice that he says in verse 2, Anochi Adonai Elohecha. Notice that it says in verse 1, it says, Vayadaber Elohim. Notice this term, Elohim. We spoke to this in our Thursday night class, in our beginner's class, Elohim. We were studying it because Elohim starts with the letter Aleph, the first letter, Elohim. It's a letter of power, the letter of strength. The letter of God. And so almost all positions of authority, all of the positional terms of authority start with Aleph. So Elohim, God, Adonai, Lord, Abba, Av, the Father. They all start with the Aleph because they're positions of strength, positions of authority. But here he says, V'daber, verse 1, V'daber Elohim et kol ha-davrim ha-eleh. That God spoke all these words to you, saying. But this word Elohim is in the plural. It is a pluralized term, Elohim. The singular form is simply El, E-L, so to speak, Aleph Lamed, El. And so El is God, would be a God singular. Elohim is plural. And yet, in your English translation, it simply says It simply says God. It doesn't say gods. The gods spoke all of these words, but it says that God spoke all of these words. So what is taking place here? It is the principle of Echad. It is the principle of unity. It is not that there are multiple gods. It is that there are multiple attributes, there are multiple facets to God. That He displays Himself, that He reveals to Himself to us in multiple ways. This is very, very important in what is the second command. What is the second command?
You shall have no other gods before me.
No, that's the first command. That's part of the first command. The second command is, you shall not make for yourself graven images. There's a reason why he says that. You are not to encapsulate God. You are not to picture Him. You are not to put a display of Him. Why? Because how you would encapsulate him, how you would display him, how you picture him, how you view him, what your perspective of him is not him. It is not him in totality. You see, what I'm saying is this. God reveals himself in many different ways. There are 10 Sephirot, there are 10 attributes, 10 main attributes to God. Are any of these one attributes God? No. They are revelations of God. But they are not in and of themselves God. They are facets of him. They are different points of view of him, different perspectives of him. But they are not him. So, I have a son sitting there, and I have a son sitting there, and I have a daughter-in-law sitting back there. So, they all look at me in a different way than you look at me. I am someone different to them than I am to you, because they are my children. Correct? You with me? So they look at me as what? Father. Come on, this is not hard. They look at me as what? Father. If they're my children, they look at me as Father. There's a lady sitting out in the hall teaching the children. She does not look at me the same way you look at me. She does not see me the same way you see me. She does not see me the same way my children see me. She has a different perspective of me. Why? Because she is my wife. And you, some of you have known me for a long time. You have a different perspective of me. Some of you have only known me for a short while. Some of you have seen me over the years, and you've seen the changes that have taken place in my life. So you have a different perspective of me. Those of you who have only known me for a short time, this is what you know of me. This is what you see of me. But you don't know about my past. You don't know the things that took place and all of these things that made me and built me and why I'm here today. You see what I'm saying? So everyone has all of these different perspectives of me. Is that who I am? Am I father? Yes. Am I only father? No. Am I husband? Yes. Am I only husband? No. Am I long-time friend? Yes. Am I only long-time friend? No. Am I short-time friend? Yes. Am I only short-time friend? No. You see, all of these are part of me, but that's not me. I am me. All of these are different facets and perspectives of me, but I am me. Do you see where I'm going with this? This is God, and this is the way we're to view God. You have a perspective of God, the way God has dealt with you in your life. You have a perspective with God, how He has revealed Himself to you in different facets and forms. I love that first song that we sang in the worship service. I love that first song. I know He heard my prayer. I know He heard my prayer. The enemy has come and said that my faith in God was dead, that He does not care. Thank God it is not true. He thrills me through and through. I know the Savior heard my earnest prayer. The reason why I chose that song is because those words have had such an impact in my life. Let me go back to it here. When in the future days the fiery trials blaze, when Satan comes to me to take away my victory, I can point him to the time when heaven's light did shine, and thank God I can say He heard my earnest prayer. I know He heard my prayer. He knows my every care. He gives to me the blessed victory. Oh yes, I feel Him now. My loyalty I vow. I know the Savior heard my plea. The enemy has said that my faith in God was dead, and if the way was rough, He did not care. Thank God it is not true. He thrills me through and through. I know the Savior heard my prayer. You see, I've been there many times in my life where I had nowhere else to turn but get on my knees and place everything on Him. I know what that is. I know what that is. And I have seen God come through in such tremendous and mighty ways.
Amen.
I have seen God explode on the scene and overturn the verdict and make something different from what it seemed it would be. I understand this. And what I'm saying is that God has revealed Himself to me in ways, in means that He has not revealed Himself to you. But God has revealed Himself to you in ways and in means that He has not revealed Himself to me. And that's okay. Because my perspective of God is exactly that. It is my perspective of God. Your perspective of God is exactly that. It is your perspective of God. But that is not God. That is not His totality. That is not all He is. God is so much more than this. He's so much grander than this. He's so much more excellent than this, much mightier than this than we could ever know or understand. You see, the rabbis teach us this. The sages teach us this. Before God created, He was known as Ein Sof. He was known as the Infinite One. And in fact, before creation, He did not have these attributes. He did not have the Sefirot. He did not have the attributes. Why did He not have the attributes? Because He was all that existed and they were not necessary. To whom did He need to show mercy? To whom did He need to show grace? To whom did He need to show justice? To whom did He have to show strength? There was no one, there was nothing but Him. Therefore, these attributes were unnecessary. But when He created the heavens and the earth, when He created Adam and Chava, when He created man, Adam and Chava fell, and there He needed to show mercy, and therefore He took to Himself the attribute of mercy, and He displayed it to them. Why? What do you mean He displayed it? He did not take their lives immediately. He did not kill them on the spot. He did not destroy them. He did not do away with them. He did not put them away. What did He do? He put them outside of the garden. And He said the time will come when one will bruise the serpent's head and bring redemption for all of mankind. See, this is what I'm saying this morning. Your perspective of God is exactly that. It is a perspective. But do not mistake that for the totality of who He is. He took these attributes upon Himself. This is part of what we call in Hebrew, we call it Tzimtzum. Everyone say Tzimtzum. T-Z-I-M, T-Z-U-M, Tzimtzum. Tzimtzum means to make room, to make space. You see, if all that exists is God, and He is infinite, to be infinite means to be without boundaries, to be without borders, to be without definition. There are no defining terms of Him. He has no boundary. He has no borders. He's all that there is, all in all. There is no heaven, there is no earth, there are no malachim, there are no angels, there are no humans, there are no stars and planets, there are no animals, there are no fish, there's no water, there's no air, there's nothing but Him. God is all that exists. This is the way it was in the beginning. We cannot imagine such a world. There was no time, there's no space, there's no place, there's no room, there's none of these things, none of that exists. But when He reveals Himself to mankind, He must then make room for mankind. When He creates the universe, why did God create the heavens and the earth? For the purpose of mankind. This is our home, our world, our palace. He created for us a home in which to dwell, in which to live. Where does this world exist? Where does this universe exist? If God's all that exists, where do we exist? within him. The same way that a mother who is expecting a child, this one here, a mother who is expecting a child. Where does the child exist? Within the mother. And in order for the child to exist within the mother, what does the mother have to do? What does the body of the mother have to do? Tzimtzum. It must make room for the baby. Do you understand this concept?
Yes.
This is the universe. We are within him. And he made room for us. And part of that making room for us is that he limited himself. That he limited himself. What do we mean he limited himself? That he defined, remember, Ein Sof, infinite. Infinity has no definition. Because the moment you begin to define it, it is no longer infinite. Infinity has no borders, no boundaries. The moment you give it a border, a boundary, it is no longer infinite. And this is why we say Tzimtzum, that God limited himself. So that we do not see him as Ein Sof, but we see him in a limited view, with a limited perspective. That in giving himself these definitions, these defining terms, these attributes, he in fact was limiting himself. But do not think that this is all that God is. If you think that this is all that God is, you make a grave error. It is kind of like the Aesop fable. How many of you know Aesop's fables? One? Aesop's fable, where he tells the story of 10 blind men who are introduced to an elephant. And they are each given a different part of the elephant to inspect. And so one blind man is placed at the foot of the elephant, at the leg of the elephant. One is, his hand is put on the elephant's ear. One, the hand is put on the elephant's trunk. One is put on the elephant's side. One is put on the elephant's tail. And so maybe it was only 5 blind men, I don't know. It was a long time ago. Thank you. And so the blind man who was put at the elephant's leg, his hand is put on the elephant's leg, and he begins to feel the leg, and the leg is big and round and tall. And the blind man says, I perceive that the elephant is much like a tree. Big and round and tall. The second blind man, his hand was put on the elephant's ear, and he said, I perceive that the elephant is much like a banana leaf. It's big, it's thin, it's flappy. I perceive it's much like a banana leaf. The third blind man, his hand was put on the elephant's trunk. He said, I perceive that the elephant is much like a snake. Is long and squirrely and doing all kinds of things. I perceive it's much like a snake. The fourth man, his hand was put on the side of the elephant. He said, I perceive the elephant is much like a wall. It's big and solid and strong and wide. The fifth blind man said, his hand was put on the elephant's tail. He said, I perceive that the elephant is much like a fly swatter. It's switching from side to side and has these little hairs on it that they use for fly swatters. I perceive that the elephant is much like a fly swatter. Who is right and who is wrong? They are in fact all right and they are all wrong. Why? Because the first man perceives the elephant to be like a tree. Is the elephant like a tree? In part, yes. But in totality, no. The second sees the elephant as being like a banana leaf. Is the elephant like a banana leaf? In part, yes, but in totality, no. The third one sees the elephant as being like a snake. Is the elephant like a snake? In part, yes, but in totality, no. The fourth one says, perceives the elephant to be like a wall. Is the elephant like a wall? In part, yes, but in totality, no. The fifth one sees the elephant as being like a fly swatter. Is the elephant like a fly swatter? In part, yes, but in totality, no. What is the moral of the story? Only when you put the parts together do you have the sum total of what the elephant is. The elephant is not any one of the singular items, but he is the totality of all of those items put together, placed together in one body. Do you understand this? Yes. This is God. This is the demonstration of God. What you see, your perspective of God, is in fact not God. It is a perspective of God. No more than the elephant was only the tree, or only the snake, or only the wall, or only the banana leaf, or only the fly swatter. The elephant is the totality, is the sum of all of its parts. And God is the sum of all of His parts. We are taught in the Zohar that this is what it means to love one's neighbor as himself. Because when Adam and Eve fell, when Adam and Chava fell, the sages tell us that within them was the divine light. Do you know that Adam and Eve wore no clothes? How many of you are aware of this? Are you aware also that they had no conception of nudity? That they did not see each other as being naked. Why did they not see each other as being naked?
They didn't understand it?
Because what the rabbis teach us, and we find this based in Scripture, they were clothed within the light of God, within the glory of God.
They hadn't sinned yet.
They were consumed. They were consumed with God. We talked about this last week in our afternoon Shabbat class, because we're talking about this. We're talking about Adam and Chava. They did not have sexual relations until after they were out of the garden. As long as they were in the garden, they did not have sexual relations. Why did they not have sexual relations? Because they were consumed. Their total pleasure was found in their relationship with God. They did not need any other type of pleasure. Their pleasure came solely through their relationship with Him. But once their relationship with God was broken, from where then does their pleasure come? Where does their enjoyment, their joy, their satisfaction, where does it come? So now they turn to one another. Now what? The glory has departed. The light is gone. And their eyes are opened and they see the physicality of their situation. And because the pleasure that they received in their relationship with God is gone, now they must turn to one another and find pleasure there. And so the sages say that at that moment when they disobeyed God and they ate of the fruit, the sages tell us that this light, that what happened was that God smashed the light. He crushed the light. And that it scattered into a billion different pieces. That like a hammer, God came down on their light and smashed it. And it scattered into a billion different pieces. When a fire is smashed, what happens? When you drop something on a fire and it is disturbed, what happens?
The embers.
Huh?
The embers.
It spreads. The embers. What do we call the embers? They're called what?
Sparks.
And so the rabbis tell us,
The divine sparks.
yes, that God smashed the fire. God smashed the light and the sparks by the billions. And that each human being, that each of us has a a divine spark, has one of those sparks within us. This isn't just mystical. Why? You're created, B'Tselem Elohim. You're created in the image of God, in His likeness. But you notice that none of us are covered, are clothed in the divine light. But if you've read the book of Revelation, you know what happens. That one day we will be clothed in divine light. They're called robes of righteousness. Why? Because you see, in the end, we will be restored to what we were in the beginning. And I say we were. Why? Because you see this, understand this. In Adam was all of humanity. All of humanity, every single one of us existed within the essence of Adam, of the first man. This is not anti-scriptural, this is very scriptural. The book of Hebrews speaks to this when he says that all of Israel paid tithes to Melchizedek. How many of you know the story of Melchizedek?
I do.
You remember that Abraham, that Lot and his family were kidnapped and taken by the 10 kings. And Abraham went and rescued them and plundered the 10 kings and brought back all of the booty, all of the bounty with him that he captured from the 10 kings. And that Melchizedek, the king of Jerusalem, the king of Jerusalem, came out to meet them, to meet Abraham. That Abraham laid at his feet a 10th portion of all that he had taken, the tithe. And that he laid it before Melchizedek. Melchi, my king, Tzedek, righteousness. My righteous king, literally. And so the book of Hebrews in the Brit Chadashah, the New Testament, says that all of Israel paid their tithe to Melchizedek through Abraham. How did they pay the tithe? They were not there. Then how did they pay the tithe? Hebrews says because they were there in his loins. That all of Israel, all of the Hebrew nation, all of the people, from his day until today, paid tithes to Melchizedek through Abraham because they were within him. And so we are taught that all of the world is found in the essence of Adam. Thus, when God crushed the light, the divine light, the sparks scattered into the soul of every human being. So we say, when we are observing Pesach and we're having the Pesach Seder, when we're having the Passover dinner, we do not say they, we say we. Not that they were at Mount Sinai, we say when we were at Mount Sinai. And one would say, but I was not at Mount Sinai. But the rabbis say, yes, you were there in the essence of the people who were there. For they are our forefathers. And even as Yitzhak was in the loin of Abraham, and Yaakov was in the loin of Yitzhak, so Yaakov was also found in Abraham. As the 12 were found, as the 12 sons were found in Jacob, Jacob was found in Yitzhak, Yitzhak was found in Abraham, so all the 12 were found then in Abraham. As the 12 grew to be the 400, as the 12 grew to be the 400, and then the 1.5 million, they all came from the 12. The 12 came from Yaakov, Yaakov came from Yitzhak, Yitzhak came from Abraham. So all the 1.5 million who left Egypt, Mitzrayim, were found in Abraham. This is what we call complexity This is what we call multiplicity and singularity. We find the many within the single one. They're all there. They're all present there. We were all present when Adam sinned. We were all within him. Think that this is not so. Rav Shaul, the Apostle Paul, speaks to this when he says, so as by one man sin entered into the world, and death passed upon all, for all sinned. What is he saying? He's talking about this very thing, that when Adam sinned, it was as though we all sinned, because we were all within him. Even as at Mount Sinai, when they said, we accept the Torah, all that you say we will do. So the rabbis teach us, the sages tell us what? It is as though all of the people, even to this present day, took the burden of Torah upon themselves. Why? Because in the presence of one is the essence of all. And so in the presence of Adam, in the essence of Adam, is the presence of all of us. We were all there. You had a question?
Yeah, back to Melchizedek. When it says in the scriptures about he didn't have a father or a mother, explain that again. Would that be Adam didn't have a mother?
It can represent that there is no named mother or father. It is an allegory. It's not that Melchizedek did not actually have a mother and father,
well,
but there's.
Jesus said it later. He said, "Your mother's at the door." He says, "Who's my mother? Who's my father?"
But then he says, "Well, these are my mothers. These are my mother. These are my brothers."
The people that.
Yes. So, but that has to do with the fact that Mashiach is eternal. Is an eternal being. He has no beginning and he has no ending. Yes, ma'am.
So,
Melchizedek, yes.
Was he a picture of Christ?
Yes,
or was he Christ?
He's an allegory. The sages teach us, the rabbis teach us that yes, he is an allegory of Mashiach. He's a representation of Mashiach, of the Messiah. Joseph is a representation of the Messiah. David is a representation. Moses is a representation. You put all of these into a single unit and you have a good idea of the Messiah. So, was he the Messiah? No. He was a representation of the Messiah. Who was he? Shem. Who is Shem? The son of Noach. Noach had 3 sons, Ham, Shem, and Japheth. Okay? And people say, what? Because we have this concept that Shem came like hundreds of years first. He did, but remember that they lived hundreds of years back then. If you read the chronology of the sons of Noach, Shem is still alive when Abraham is alive. And so what our sages tell us is that Shem is actually the founder, the builder of the city of Jerusalem, the original city of Jerusalem.
And he trained.
And that Abraham, when Abraham was called from Babylon to go to the promised land, that he goes to Jerusalem. And this is why, because who is Shem? Is it really so mystical when you think about it? Is it so out of this world that Abraham would go to Shem? Because Shem is in fact family.
And righteous.
What do you mean family? He's family. Shem is Abraham's great-great-grandfather. Abraham is a Shemite. He is a Semite. This is where we get the word Semite. Anti-Semitism means against the family of Shem. Shem, Abraham is a descendant of Shem. Israel are Semites. That is, they are the descendants of Shem. So are the Arabians, as in Saudi Arabia. They are all, why? They are the children of who? They are the children of Ishmael. Who is Ishmael? The son of Abraham. Therefore what? They're Semites. So by the way are the Jordanians. the Moabites and the Amorites. Who are the Moabites and the Amorites? They are the children of Lot and his daughters, who sinned after Sodom and Gomorrah. They're all Shemites. They're all from Shem. See, what you have in the Middle East, for the most part, in that whole part of the world, then you have Esav. Who is Esav? You have the Moabites, the Edomites. Who are the Edomites? Who are the Edomites? They're the children of Esav. Who is Esav? The twin brother of Jacob. Who is his father? Who's Esav's father? Isaac. They're all one big happy family. They're not so happy. They're all related. Yes, this is a family quarrel that has been taking place for 4,000 years. And it's still taking place today. And it will take place until Mashiach comes. By the way, just a little extra nugget. I won't, well, excuse me. That was kind of like a little Miss Piggy sound over there. Anyway. I'll get to you in just a second. Just a little nugget for you. I won't charge you extra for this. What color was David HaMelech, David the king? What color was his hair? And what was his complexion? Red.
Ruddy.
Yes, he was a ruddy complexion. Do you know why?
He was the Anglo branch of Israelites.
No, not really. The reason why is because his mother was Ruth, a Moabitess, from Esav, who was Edom. Edom is red. So, when we have all of these concepts of Yeshua, who is a direct descendant of whom? David. What color was his hair? And what was his complexion? I don't know, because the Bible doesn't tell us. But you know what? There's a very good probability that he was a redhead. Do you know that because of David's red hair and red complexion, do you know that the majority of the tribes of Israel did not want him to be king? Why? Because he did not look Jewish. Have you heard those terms before? He did not look Jewish. He did not look like a Jew. He had freckles. He was a freckle-faced redhead. Why? Because he had Esav in him as well. He had Esau in him through Ruth. Do you know that the sages tell us that Adam was probably a redhead? Why? From Adam we go to Adom. Adom is the Hebrew word for red. Adom. Adom means red in Hebrew.
The dirt could have been red.
The dirt was red. You've seen red dirt, right? Georgia and those kinds of areas, the Carolinas and all, Tennessee. Okay?
To find the Garden of Eden, you have to find the red dirt.
Good. You had a question?
I was wondering if you could tell me what
Elohe means their God.
But you said
Elohecha means your God. It is a combination of lecha means your and Elohim. So they just smash it together. Elohecha means your God. Yes. So Adonai Elohecha, the Lord your God. Okay. All right. So back to our discussion here. And we were saying that to be careful with our perception of God. To understand that these are exactly that. These are perceptions, but not the totality. And we were talking about that when God smashed the light, that the spark came into all of us. Watch this. Watch how this works. So you have a spark, 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 you have a spark. They have a spark, they have a spark, they have a spark, that one, 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 that one.
I have to.
There are 100,000 people in this community. They all have sparks. In the valley, what, 1.5 million? They all have sparks. The United States, how many? 20 million? They all have sparks. In the world, 7 billion. They all have, each one has a spark. Each of the 7 billion has a spark. Question: how do we get back the divine light? You have to bring all the sparks together to make a single light, no? This is what it means to love your neighbor as yourself. That you take his light and you bring it together into my light, and my light into your light, and your light in her light in his light, and all the way through, one person after the other, after the other, after the other. And only in the joining together of all of the sparks do we return to the divine light. Do you see this? It makes sense. It makes sense. So, this is why the main command between you and other people is that you are to love your neighbor as yourself. And this is why Yeshua explained, who is my neighbor? Whomever you encounter in life. That is your neighbor.
Amen.
That's the story of the Good Samaritan. It is whomever you encounter in life.
Reminds me of forsake not the assembly of yourselves.
Excuse me?
The verse that says, forsake not the assembly.
Forsake not the assembly of yourself. Yes, but even more so, he says, giving preference one to another. That I am to prefer you. You see, Paul understood these things because he was a Jewish rabbi. And what is his perspective of himself? Of all the sinners, I am the worst. I'm the chief. I'm the worst of all the sinners. My perspective of myself is to be here. My perspective of you is to be here. And I'm to give you the preference. It's not me first, it's you first. We must let go of the egoism of this world and this life of which we are, and join forces. How do I join forces with you? That I give to you who and what I have and am, and give it to you in my totality, in all of its totality. And you give to others all that you are and all that you have in its totality. Why? Because it's not about me and it's not about you. It's about Him, and it's about restoring the divine light to mankind. This is what is known as Tikkun HaOlam. This is what is known as the reparation, the restoration of the world. How do we repair the world? How is the world brought to healing? The world is only brought to healing when I care so much about you that I would rather die myself than allow you to die. When I care so much about you that I would rather give you everything I have and I go poor and destitute than allow you to be in want. That I care so much about you that I would rather sin and go to the eternal flame myself than allow you to sin and go to the eternal flame. You understand these terms because this is Moshe. This is the life of Moshe. This is what he was doing. He was pouring himself into the people, even to the point of death. And when God said, I will have no more to do with these people, I'm going to destroy them and put them away, and I will take you and I will make you a great nation. And Moshe said to God himself face to face, what? If you blot them out of your book, blot my name also out of the book.
Amen. That's what Adam did for Eve also.
What did the Apostle Paul say in Romans chapter?
Depart and be with Christ, which is more needful to stay.
No, he said, I wish I could be accursed for the salvation of my people. This is to be our mindset.
Who said that?
Paul, Book of Romans. I believe chapter 9. This is the heart. This is supposed to be our heart. That it's not about me. Nothing about me. Nothing about me. It's all about you. Because through you, it's all about God. I am only truly serving God when I am serving my fellow man. So what happened last Sunday? Let's go speak to this. What happened last Sunday? How can such a thing happen? How do such things happen? What is wrong with our world? What is going on? But why? Because we have in all of us, we have the divine spark.
We're divided.
Because I am not willing to pour myself into you. And you are not willing to pour yourself into someone else. By pouring, I mean exactly that. Emptying, as we are told to do. Empty ourselves. I am not willing to follow the Messiah. I say that I follow the Messiah. But to what extent do I follow the Messiah? Because you see, what the Messiah did was he traded places with me. To what end? To the ultimate end, that he ended up dying and sacrificing himself for my sake. Do you remember what Mashiach says to Kepha? Would you also die with me? Would you endure what I'm enduring? When I say that I would follow Yeshua, when I say, as we sang earlier, that I'm walking with the King, what does this mean? Do you remember what his words are to those who follow him? He said, except you take up your cross and follow me.
Right.
Taking up a cross, that's not a good emblem. Especially in that time, in that day, where the reality of it was there in front of their faces. Where they walked by the crucified humans. Their blood dripping, their guts hanging. The flies and the stench of it all. It would be as though they guillotined someone out here on the street and they left their body, like they used to do in England. They would cut off a person's head and then they would hang them on the London Bridge. The London Bridge is not really a good bridge. They would hang their body on the London Bridge and they would put the head on a pike and they would leave it there until the body disintegrated. Can you imagine the stench of walking across that bridge? What I'm saying is that when Yeshua puts in their mind, when he draws for them the mental image of them carrying a cross, what? To be executed. Except you take up your own execution and follow me.
Loving sacrificial.
Huh?
Loving sacrificial.
To what end?
To the death.
To the
No matter what
death.
happens,
Huh?
no matter what happens,
No matter what happens.
we're going to do what God wants. And I like the 3 men in a furnace. If he saves me, great, and if he don't, I will not bow.
Exactly. Exactly that kind of attitude. But here's the truth. Most of us do not have that kind of attitude. You say, oh, I would never deny him. I would follow him anywhere. Oh, yes. Prove it. This is what the book of James chapter 2 says. Prove it. How do I prove it? I prove it by how I treat you. Because what I do to you is what I'm doing to him. What do you mean? He said, when you do it to the least of these, it is as though you have done it to me. When you are clothing the naked, feeding the hungry, giving water to the thirsty, giving shelter to the destitute, to the homeless, when you are taking care of the widows and the orphans, when you're going to the jails and visiting the prisoners, when you're going to the hospitals and visiting those who are sick, when you're doing these things, Yeshua said, it is as though you're doing it unto me. But he said, when you do not do these things, when you know this person is hungry but you do not feed them, you know this person is naked but you do not clothe them, you know this person is thirsty but you do not give them drink, you know this person is homeless but you do not give them shelter, you know this person is in prison but you do not visit them, you know that this person is in a hospital but you do not go to see with them and pray for them, when you do not do it to them, you do not do it unto me. You say you would do these things for Yeshua. Really? He says, no, you wouldn't. That's not my argument, that's his argument.
What scripture is that?
It's in Matthew 25.
Matthew 25. So, saying all of that, to say, how do we regather the sparks? What did Yeshua pray? John chapter 17. You, talking to the Father, you in me, and I in them, and them in us. What? Echad. The unity. When we all come together, we create light. What is brighter? The darkness or the darkness with a candle? Come on, boy. Not a trick question. What is brighter? Darkness or darkness with a candle? What is brighter? Darkness with one candle or darkness with two candles? What is brighter? Darkness with two candles or darkness with 5 candles? What is brighter? Darkness with 5 candles or darkness with 20 candles? What is brighter? Darkness with 20 or darkness with 100? You see, if we want the light to shine, it shines when we come together. When we are joined together. You had a question?
I actually came wanting to ask you if you could explain your understanding of to take up the cross and follow the meaning of that. And you mentioned it, so I thought it was a good opportunity to ask you if you could explain how you think Yeshua exactly did that in each of our lives. Say, for example, in the world we're living in now, how would one do that?
By giving everything you have to others. That's what he did.
But like our homes and the things we have, I mean, is it necessary to just
You-
give it away or sell it, or?
It depends on where God leads you. God will tell you what he wants you to do, but understand this, no possession you have is yours.
Right.
It's his. You see, I look at my car as being my car and my home as my home. I look at my wife as being my wife. She's mine. I look at my children as being my children. They are mine. But none of this is mine. It is all his. He has put it, it's not even in loan. He has given us the resources to turn around and help one another. It's not that he's saying, now you go find a way. You go make your way, you go find your way. He actually has given you the means to which you communicate, you connect with the person next to you. You see, this is what the early assembly did. This is exactly how they lived. People think it was socialism. It wasn't socialism. It was echad. It was unity. It was great love. So great, it was sacrificial love. That they were willing to give everything that they had for the sake of someone else. This is a good opportunity. So you ask a good question. So let me tell you a story. And I guess we won't get much further in the lesson today, but that's okay. There was a man by the name of Nachdimon. Everyone say Nachdimon. So say it together, it's all one word, Nachdimon. Nachdimon is the man you know from John chapter 3, Nicodemus. Do you know that the Talmud tells us the story of Nachdimon, of Nicodemus? And do you know that he is seen to this day in good favor by the Jewish people? Nicodemus. His full name was Nachdimon ben Gurion. Say Nachdimon ben Gurion. Now that last name, Ben Gurion, should ring a bell with you if you were a student of Israel. Who was Ben Gurion? Anybody know? So go look it up on Wikipedia and come back next week and tell me. Ben Gurion was the first president of the modern state of Israel. Ben Gurion, yes. That was not his given name. That was the name he took. When you move to Israel, you take a name for yourself. A new name, a Hebrew name. As in Golda Meir. She was known over here. She was actually a teacher, I think, in Chicago before she became the Prime Minister of Israel. Back in the late 60s, early 70s. She was Golda Meir. M-A-Y-E-R, like Oscar Mayer. So, he took to himself the name David ben Gurion. David, after the king, David Hamelech, David the king, and Ben Gurion after Nachdimon. Because he wanted to take to himself the attributes of these two men as he led Israel as the first president. So this Nachdimon, who was he? Well, first of all, understand that he was the wealthiest man in all of Jerusalem. Which tells you what? Nicodemus was the wealthiest man in all of Jerusalem. So he was probably one of the wealthiest of Israel. Understand that Jerusalem is the heart. It is the heart of the religion, it is the heart of the judicial, it is the heart, it is the capital. So if I told you that someone was the richest person in Washington, D.C., what would that tell you? They've got money. Not only was Nachdimon very wealthy, he was also a judge. In fact, he was a Supreme Court judge. He was a justice on the Israeli Supreme Court of that time. Every major city had what was called a triumvirate, a court of 3 judges who would hear major cases. Nachdimon was one of the triumvirate, one of the 3 judges of the court of Jerusalem. If the court is in Jerusalem, what does that tell you? Jerusalem is the capital. If I'm talking about the court in Washington, what comes to your mind?
Supreme Court.
Therefore, it is the highest court. So if I tell you that he was a judge, one of 3 judges on this court in Jerusalem, what am I telling you? He is what?
Supreme Court judge.
He is a judge over all of Israel. Not only that, but he was best friends with a very important man, a man with whom you should be familiar. His name was Gamliel. Everyone say Gamliel.
Gamliel.
Who is Gamliel? Gamaliel? It's the way the English Bible has it. Gamaliel. Gamliel. Who is Gamliel? Gamliel is Paul's teacher, Paul's rabbi. Gamliel, Paul, Nachdimon, Nicodemus, they're all friends. They're all buddies. Brings up an interesting question. Did Paul know Yeshua? Did Paul ever interact with Yeshua? Well, we know that Nachdimon did. We know that Gamliel did. What does that tell you?
Likely he did.
Likely he did. Not only this, but Gamliel was what was called the Nasi, Hanasi Sanhedrin, the president of the Sanhedrin. He was the head. He was the top judge. Nachdimon was his second, was his vice. Does this tell you something about this man, Nicodemus? When it says that a ruler came to Jesus by night, John 3:1, do you see what it means by ruler? He's no small person. The Talmud explains all of this to us. By the way, who is Gamliel? Gamliel is the grandson of Hillel. Who is Hillel? He's the founder of the Prushim, of the Pharisees. He was the original Pharisee. Gamliel is his grandson. Gamliel is the president of the Sanhedrin. Nicodemus is the vice president. Nicodemus is a judge on the Supreme Court of Israel. This is the one who comes to Yeshua by night. So why am I laying all of this out for you? Because you remember in John chapter 3 that he does come to Yeshua by night, and he says, we know you are sent from God. For no man can do these things except he come from God. Do you remember that it is Nachdimon, it is Nicodemus and Yosef, Joseph of Arimathea, who take the body of Yeshua off of the cross and prepare his body for burial and put him in the tomb. So you want to know what the Talmud has to say about Nachdimon?
They don't like him, probably.
Nachdimon was so destitute at his death that he had to be clothed in another man's clothes, and he had to be buried on another man's property in order to be properly buried. Whose clothes and whose property? Gamliel. Because they were best friends. That when Nicodemus died, Gamliel clothed him in his own clothes and buried him in his own yard. Because Gamliel, who was one of the wealthiest men in all of Israel, a judge and a member of the Sanhedrin, second the vice president, died absolutely destitute. Why did he die absolutely destitute? Acts chapter 3. Yes. He gave everything he had because he fell so in love with Yeshua that he gave everything he had to feed the poor and take care of the widows and the orphans of this assembly, of these people. He was already known as a compassionate and merciful man. It was his responsibility. He filled up all of the wells with water before any of the festivals to ensure that all of the people from Israel coming into Jerusalem had sufficient water to see them through the festivals. Remember that this would not just be 1 day or 2 days. Many times it would be 7 days, even 8 days of festival that he had to provide the water for all of it, that he chose to. He took it upon himself to do this. That he would go in and he would pay people's debts, that he would go in and bail people out of prison and take care of people. He would find people who were needy and hungry and all of these things. And he gave of himself and he gave of himself and he gave of himself, literally till he had nothing left to give. And because he turned to Yeshua, he lost his position. This man literally lost everything he had. And what he didn't lose, he had given it away. And he had no more means to make money. This is what this is the story from the Talmud about Nicodemus. so that when he died, he himself died naked and destitute, having nothing of his own. And Gamliel came out and took his body and put him in his own clothes and buried him in his own ground, so that his good friend would have a place to rest. Now, in saying this answers the question, what did Yeshua mean? That's what he meant.
Was the head of the Sanhedrin a believer too then? If he like Nicodemus?
There are suspicions. We don't know. We don't know. We know that there were many among the head of the Pharisees who, yes, they were believers. Nachdimon is an example that's given to us by the scriptures, name by name. Did Gamliel believe? We don't know. We know that we do know in the book of Acts that he defends the followers of Yeshua before the court. He defends them. He tells the court, he instructs the Sanhedrin, leave these men alone, leave these people alone. So, we have to close, but to what extent am I supposed to go? To the furthest extent. Why? That's how far my rabbi went for me. So that's how far I must go for you. We should be compelled to not worry. We should be compelled to not worry about what my cost is. Because my cost is thinking then about what? Me. And my thought is not to be on me. This is the egoism that we must release and let go of. Because it's not about me. It's about him. And how do I serve him? By serving you. Why? Because in serving you, I'm drawing your spark to my spark. And 2 sparks are better than 1. And if I can get 3 sparks together, the greater the light. And if I can get 5 sparks together, even greater the light. If I can get 100 sparks together, how great a light. If we could get 1,000 sparks together, how great and brilliant the light would be. You see, this is why it says in the book of Acts that the whole city, that the people, that they were loved and admired by the people, by the Jews. Why? Because they had such an expression of love for others. This is why in persecution, true faith does not die, it grows. This is why under persecution, what happened to that early assembly? Did it die? No. What happened? The sparks were scattered. And the Besorah, the gospel, went out into the whole world. And now what? Gathering sparks back in. Back together. This is what it is all about. And so in saying this, as we close here, because we're going to be speaking, I'm laying the foundation for you. Do not make a graven image. There's a reason why he says it. And it's not what many people think it is. It's not that images are wrong. It's not that you cannot have a statue. It's not that you can't have a picture. You just cannot have a statue or a picture of him. And there's a reason why. And that is, he is not what you perceive him to be. That is just a single perception of a single facet. That is just a glimpse of who he is. And if you want to see who he is, pour yourself into as many other people, because we all have a perspective of who he is. And when you see him through her eyes, his eyes, her eyes, his eyes, his eyes, her eyes, when you start seeing God through other people's eyes, you start perceiving God in reality, in truth.
Amen.
So with that we say, Shabbat Shalom. Stand for the blessing, please. You would lift up your hands to receive the blessing. Yevareka Adonai ve'yishmereka. Er Adonai panav elecha v'yichuneka. Yisar Adonai panav elecha ve'yasem lecha shalom. May Adonai bless you and keep you. May Adonai shine his face upon you and be gracious to you. May Adonai lift up his countenance upon you and give you his peace from Sadcha Shalom Yeshua Mashiach, the Prince of Peace, Yeshua the Messiah, the Imru. Amen. Shabbat Shalom.